Well, hey there, I'm Joshua Johnson. It's great to be with you on this Monday, November 14th. And tonight we're talking about gun violence.
To hear about it other places has an impact, but to be able to imagine it in a place that I know so deeply definitely shakes you a little bit more.
3 University of Virginia football players are dead after a shooting on campus. A student is in police custody. We're live in Charlottesville with the latest. Arizona is still processing ballots from the midterms, so who will win the race for governor? We'll have the latest vote totals and more on how the count is going. Plus, who's worth 3 hours of President Biden's time? China's president clearly is. He had a long talk with Xi Jinping during the G20 summit. How much will their talk ease their tensions? And it was a rough day in class for the University of California system. More than 48,000 employees are on strike. We'll break down the key sticking points and hear from a scholar on the picket line. Let's begin with that shooting at the University of Virginia. Police say they have a suspect in custody, a student, accused of killing 3 other students and hurting 2 more. It happened last night as a group of students returned from a class trip to Washington. The suspect opened fire on their charter bus and then fled. UVA sent alerts for students and faculty to shelter in place. Today, officers took 22-year-old Christopher Darnell Jones Jr. into custody. He faces 3 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of using a handgun in the commission of a felony. As it turns out, the university's police chief learned of the capture during a news conference today.
We just received information the suspect is in custody. Just need a moment to thank God. Breathe a sigh of relief.
It is too early to know why this all happened. We do know a bit more about the victims, 3 football players, Devin Chandler, Lavelle Davis Jr., and Deshaun Perry. The alleged shooter used to be on the team. As for the injured students, officials say 1 is in good condition, the other is in critical condition. Let's start with NBC's Ryan Nobles, who joins us now from Charlottesville. Ryan, how are things on campus tonight?
Well, Joshua, as you might imagine, this campus is just shaken by what has happened here over the past 24 hours. In just the last 20 minutes or so, we were here for a vigil on the South Lawn of the UVA campus, where thousands of students came out of their residence halls and their homes to just be together. It was a completely silent event where they just held up lights and candles to remember the lives lost. And this is, of course, a campus that has been through a lot over the past 10 years. There was the brutal death of lacrosse player Yardley Love. You had the Unite the Right white supremacist rally that took place on these grounds and in this town. And, of course, there was the missing college student from several years ago that went missing and was later found dead. And the police chief, Tim Longo, who you have already heard from, he was the one that delivered the news that the suspect had been found. He was the police chief at the city of Charlottesville. He's now the police chief here at UVA. He's been here through all these different tragedies. And I asked him during that press conference today what it's like to have to deal with something like this all over again.
Chief Longo, you personally have been involved with so many tragedies that have happened here in Charlottesville. If you could just talk, I don't know if you've been able to process those feelings at all, what this community has been through over the past decade or so, and how this impacts all of that right now.
I don't know that I've really had time to process that to the extent that you speak of. I can tell you that the people that are standing behind me now, it speaks for itself.
And you can see the chief getting emotional there. And what he's talking about is this community coming together. That's what we're seeing happen here tonight. This is what we expect to see happen over the next couple of days. They are reeling from these losses and also, Joshua, trying to figure out why this happened.
Ryan, what more do we know about the 3 deceased victims from the shooting who we're showing now on the screen, or about the student who is suspected of killing them? I mean, was this student on anyone's radar before this happened?
As a matter of fact, he was, Joshua. The police telling us earlier today that there was a hazing investigation that took place on campus that he was a part of. They didn't say whether or not he was the target of the hazing or if he was the person delivering the hazing, just that he was a part of this investigation, but that the investigation ended up being inconclusive because people involved in it did not want to be forthcoming about what happened. And then there was also reports that he was telling people, particularly a person off campus not associated with the community, that he had a gun. And police at that time followed up on that. They interviewed his roommate. They went into his room to try and see if they could locate that firearm. They never did. And the police chief also said that both of these incidents never had anything to do with a specific threat, and cautioned us not to take those different issues that they knew about his past and connected to what happened here last night. Still, it does raise questions that there was concerns about this particular young man during a period of time leading up to what happened here last night. And it's certainly going to be a part of the investigation going forward.
For sure. Thank you, Ryan. That's NBC's Ryan Noble starting us off tonight from the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. In Arizona, the gubernatorial race there remains up in the air. About 93% of the ballots are in, but we are still characterizing the race between Democrat Katie Hobbs and Republican Kari Lake as too close to call. At the moment, about 29,000 votes separate them. Right now, Ms. Hobbs is leading. We're expecting more ballot results any minute now, maybe enough to call the race. We'll see. NBC's Steve Patterson is in Phoenix with more on this race. Steve, what are we expecting tonight that might help us figure out who won this race?
The chairman of elections here in Maricopa County says expect a, quote, big drop. And when he says big drop, he means it. We know, this is confirmed, that officials say that every ballot that was dropped off on Election Day here in Arizona, and there were 290,000 of them, in Maricopa County, 290,000 ballots in one county. That is a record here for this county. Every one of them has been counted. So we're talking all corners of Maricopa County. We've seen some come in already from Pima County, but the big drop, the one here in Maricopa, will essentially, all things considered, as far as we can tell, will determine the election of who will be Arizona's next governor. We expect that possibly in the next few minutes. We don't know. Again, it all depends upon performance. So the breakdown, the ratio of who wins in Pima County versus who wins here in Maricopa County, who has what percentage, that will determine if there is a second day of this, where I'm standing out here for 10 hours talking, questioning the fact of who could be the next governor of Arizona. We still don't know what the makeup of that vote is, but we know this is going to be a big drop. And again, there's still about 94,000 outstanding ballots here in Maricopa County. At the beginning of the day, there were about 160,000 statewide. We know that number has come down again because these other counties are coming in. So you take those other counties, then you add in this big drop. We should know a whole lot more in just a few minutes as it comes down. Josh?
Steve, have we heard anything more from officials about the pace of the count? We know that the Republican candidate Kari Lake has cast some aspersions on the pace of the counting. Granted, ballots take time to count, and every state counts them a little bit differently. But have officials been addressing some of the concerns over the pace of the count?
Yeah, first of all, I'm glad you said that states count them differently, because Arizona just does this. They've been pretty slow, comparatively to the rest of the country for years, if not a decade, if not more than a decade. This is just something that officials here do. It has been pretty consistent. The only variables are twofold. One is that obviously this is a purple state now. This is a battleground state. This isn't a place where John McCain is beating his opponent by 24 points. This is a place where people are really paying paying attention to the end of all of these races. And so more people are getting upset about the end of these races, especially when it comes to the pacing. Secondly, of course, is that, as you alluded to, Kari Lake has been pointing toward the slow count and saying that this shouldn't be, that there's something wrong with elections here. Election officials say that's unequivocally not true. And then let me add a third one. It's what I just mentioned when you asked me that last question, 290,000 votes on one day. And so there's a lot to process there. They do it on paper ballot here in Arizona. And all things considered, election officials here say it's actually going pretty fast compared to what they're used to. Here's what they told us. Listen to this.
This is fast for Maricopa County. It usually takes us anywhere between 10 and 12 days to complete the count, and we think we're going to be done by the end of this week. We follow the laws as they're written. We have a lot of amazing laws here that allow voters different kinds of access and to vote in the ways that work best for them. So we're going to continue to do the work here. We're going to continue to count the ballots, and we're going to continue to provide the results to the public.
You hear there a very thorough process. And again, it still could take to the end of the week for them to count every vote. That doesn't mean we can't make a call tonight if there is one to make. Josh?
All right. Thank you, Steve. That's NBC's Steve Patterson with the latest from Phoenix. Now, next month, Georgia will hold its runoff for Senate. Democratic incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock is up against Republican challenger Herschel Walker. NBC News projects that Democrats will keep control of the Senate. The re-election of Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Masto sealed it. So the Georgia race will either maintain the current 50-50 split or grow the Democrats' majority by one. No wonder both candidates are keeping busy on the campaign trail.
It's critically important that people show up. And I'm proud of the fact that I finished first. I finished first in every time my name's been on the ballot. And I'm going to finish first again.
You got to tell your friends to get out and vote. If you don't have no friends, go make some friends, get them to get out and vote. We got to make sure they know that we want to take our country back.
NBC's Antonia Hilton has more.
Both Senate candidates are back on the road, and a lot of the game right now is just educating voters, making sure that they're aware a runoff is actually happening on December 6th, that there's just over 3 weeks left. This is a lot less time than the last time Georgia went through a runoff. And so they just need to make sure that people are aware of the dates, not just the people who voted for them the last time, but each of them is trying to reach a new group of folks, particularly Republican Herschel Walker, who we saw underperform other statewide Republicans. Here in Augusta, Georgia, he trailed Republican Governor Kemp by about 2,000 votes, and he really needs some of those people to switch teams and vote for Walker to even have a chance of making this happen. So with Senate control off the table now, thanks to Nevada, Republicans really have their work cut out for them, making sure that their base is still energized. Take a listen to some of the Walker supporters I met today.
One of the things I'm concerned about is they're announcing the Senate victories, and I'm afraid that the Republicans are not going to turn out because it won't bring a majority. But they still got to turn out because there's going to be another election in a few years.
Got to keep it going. And I think on this last race, I think the worst thing we ever did was kept repeating the red wave. We're going to do the red wave, because that was like putting a red flag in front of the Democrats like a bull, putting a red flag in front of a bull and saying, and that just made the Democrats get out there and say, we're not going to let them do the red wave.
One of the voters that I talked to said that she really wants to see Republicans like Governor Kemp and Governor DeSantis come here, get on the ground with Herschel Walker, and help him as a team. I asked her, though, if she would like to see President Trump here, and she kind of balked, saying that she felt like, when the former president comes to Georgia, sometimes he brings drama with him. And I think that gives us a good sense of the play here in Georgia, but also the state of the Republican Party more broadly.
That was NBC's Antonia Hilton reporting. Still to come, President Biden in Bali. He spent a long time meeting with China's President Xi Jinping. What did they talk about for 3 hours? Plus, there's a lot happening with the January 6th committee, and we'll bring you up to speed. We're glad you're with us for Now Tonight from NBC News. World leaders are beginning to meet in Indonesia for some key economic talks. But one of the biggest talks has already happened on the sidelines. They're meeting for the G20 summit in Bali. The group of 20 includes the world's major economies, 19 countries, and the European Union. And this will be the largest gathering of these leaders since the pandemic began. You can see them getting ready there in Bali, Indonesia. But before all the speeches and the bilateral talks, President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping already met in person. It's their first face-to-face meeting since Joe Biden became president. He says they spent 3 hours talking about everything from Taiwan to the economy to climate change.
We had an open and candid conversation about our intentions and our priorities. It was clear, he was clear and I was clear, that we'll defend American interests and values, promote universal human rights, and stand up for the international order and work in lockstep with our allies and partners. We're going to compete vigorously, but I'm not looking for conflict. I'm looking to manage this competition responsibly.
This year's G20 comes as global interest rates are rising and during the war in Ukraine. Russia's Vladimir Putin is not planning to attend, sending Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in his place. NBC White House correspondent Carol Lee has more from Bali. Hey, Carol.
President Biden beginning a series of meetings here at the G20 where Ukraine is expected to be the topic that's at top of mind in his discussions with his counterparts. The president's trying to keep U.S. allies on the same page when it comes to supporting Ukraine and isolating Russia. Earlier, he met with President Xi Jinping of China, that high-stakes meeting lasting some 3 hours. And the president of China discussed a range of topics from North Korea to Taiwan to economic concerns. And the president coming out of that meeting saying that he believes that President Xi is willing to compromise on exactly what remains to be seen. But the president tasked the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, with traveling to China to follow up on those conversations. As far as the specifics, there's still a number of disagreements that the two countries have, particularly on Taiwan. The president saying that he didn't see any imminent threat of the Chinese invading Taiwan, and China saying, look, that any U.S. meddling in the Taiwan issue would be seen as crossing a red line. So that's still a sticking point. On North Korea, it's unclear that the president got any commitment from the Chinese to try to dissuade the North Koreans from launching a nuclear test, which is something that the U.S. has been concerned about for some time. And then on Ukraine, China still has that close relationship with Russia, and the president didn't get any statement out of the Chinese that was aimed at isolating Russia or condemning the war in Ukraine. At the G20, the U.S. officials say don't expect any meetings between the Russians and U.S. officials, but the president does have some other meetings with world leaders that are significant. He'll meet for the first time with the new British Prime Minister and the new Prime Minister of Italy, where, again, Ukraine is expected to be the top topic of discussion. Joshua.
All right. Thank you, Carol. That's NBC White House correspondent Carol Lee reporting from Bali, Indonesia. The January 6th committee is set to dissolve in the new year, no matter who controls Congress. But a lot's been going on lately, including today. Former President Trump had been subpoenaed to testify and hand over documents today. That did not happen. On Friday, he sued to prevent the testimony. This evening, the committee's chair and vice chair issued a statement. It accuses Mr. Trump of hiding from the investigation and says the group will consider its options in the days ahead. Meanwhile, the committee seems to have gotten its way with a separate subpoena. This one went to Kelly Ward, the head of Arizona's Republican Party, seeking her cell phone records. Today, the U.S. Supreme Court paved the way for that to happen. Dr. Ward had asked the court to block that subpoena. Justices declined to do that. The court's order noted that Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas would have granted the injunction. It did not explain the rationale for the order or for the difference of opinion. Let's get into all this with MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuaid. She's a former U.S. attorney in Michigan and a professor at the University of Michigan Law School. Professor, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Joshua. Glad to be with you.
Could we start with this matter of the testimony from the former president? I think that even when the committee decided to subpoena him as its final act of business at its last hearing, we all kind of knew it probably wasn't going to happen on time. There was going to be some kind of a challenge or just a flat no. So how does this factor in? The fact that his testimony always seemed kind of like an open question, and now we don't have it.
I think that's right, Joshua. I think most of us, when we saw that subpoena be issued, thought there's no chance he's ever going to actually testify there. But I suppose issuing that subpoena is sort of crossing a T and dotting an I, giving him the opportunity to come in and tell his side of the story. You know, not so much to grill him to find out information. I doubt you'd get a straight answer from him, but at least to lock him into a story. And if he wants, if he's got some innocent explanation for his conduct, there's his chance. And now he's forfeited that chance by contesting the subpoena. You know, by filing this lawsuit, I think he will effectively run out the clock and never make it there. But, you know, the committee, one reason to wait until the end to serve that subpoena is you want to talk to the people at the highest levels after you have educated yourselves as best as possible so you know what questions to ask. So I don't know that it was necessarily gamesmanship that caused them to wait until the end, but no doubt it either wittingly or unwittingly doomed their success.
We've been kind of learning about the last weeks of the Trump administration in a variety of different ways. One from what we saw on January 6th, 2021, one from the investigation of the documents that were taken from the White House and found at Mar-a-Lago, and now tonight with this interview of Vice President Mike Pence that ABC News is releasing this evening. Here is part of what the former vice president told David Muir. The words the former vice president is referring to is that tweet from Trump tweeting Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. Professor, what impact does it have when we're getting the story of January 6th in all of these different ways? I feel like something is bound to get lost by having it come out in so many different venues rather than through just one cohesive, coherent investigation.
Well, I think when history is occurring all around us, it's hard for us to put it into perspective and have one steady narrative about it. But that is the purpose of a January 6th committee. It isn't to file criminal charges. It is to figure out what happened and to write a comprehensive report about that. You know, the fact that Mike Pence never testified before the committee, I think, is a loss. We did hear from two of his aides, but not Pence himself. And now he seems to be on a little bit of a, you know, campaign tour, maybe laying the groundwork for his own 2024 presidential bid. And I think people want to make sense of what happened that day. You know, he chooses to be very careful about not blasting Donald Trump too hard. But now, maybe after what we saw in the midterm elections, he feels a little bit of license to say a little more about what he thinks. But I do think that that will be recorded in history. To say that Donald Trump was reckless is nothing surprising, is nothing astonishing. But I think it's nice to hear Mike Pence finally acknowledge that. And I still think that it could be important later down the road if he is to ever testify in a criminal case against Donald Trump. It's nice to see a preview of what he might say if asked under oath in court.
And also worth noting that Mike Pence has a new book that he is selling called So Help Me God, which comes out tomorrow. So the timing here is not coincidental. One more thing I should ask you about, and those are the phone records from Kelly Ward, the Arizona GOP chair. How do those factor into what we learn about January 6th? Why her and why those records?
Well, there are a couple of things, Joshua, that are really interesting about that. Now, she is there in Arizona. We know that is a state where there were fake electors, and there was also pressure administered, as Rusty Bowers testified in the January 6th committee hearings, to reconvene their legislature and have them select a new slate of electors. And so Kelly Ward, as the party chair, may have had phone calls with people about that activity. And so those phone records are important to see who she talked to. But the other really interesting thing here is when the Supreme Court ruled that they would not block those records and they should go over to the January 6th committee, Clarence Thomas was one of the people who dissented from that decision and said he would block that order. Why is that? Is Jay Thomas somebody whose phone records might be there? Might it lead to somebody that might be harmful? So the fact that he decided that case and did not recuse himself is a curious one. Now, I suppose if he knows that there's just no way that his wife's phone calls can be implicated, well, maybe that's not a big deal. But I'll be very curious to see whether her phone number shows up on those records.
MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuaid. Professor, always good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua.
We will get to some of today's other top stories in just a moment, including the latest on the deadly crash at a Dallas air show, the head of Customs and Border Protection stepping down, and our feature report on the women in Ukraine who became prisoners of war. Tonight's headlines begin with a plane crash in Dallas. It happened on Saturday at an air show. Officials have identified the 6 people killed. All were members of the Commemorative Air Force. It's a Texas nonprofit that flies and restores World War II aircraft. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the collision. NBC's Morgan Chesky has more from Dallas.
It is a somber scene here outside Dallas Executive Airport where this fatal mid-air collision took place Saturday afternoon. And you can see a growing memorial behind me for those 6 crew members with the Commemorative Air Force who were killed when these 2 planes collided. That P-63 King Cobra, a fighter aircraft from World War II, and a B-17 Flying Fortress, the much larger plane seen in that horrific video that took the brunt of that smaller plane's blow, both falling to the ground in a fiery impact that NTSB investigators spent Sunday scouring, searching for any evidence as to a potential cause. This afternoon, we did learn that 2 devices were recovered from the charred wreckage, a GPS device from the smaller plane, and an electronic flight display on board that B-17. Investigators sharing that they hope both of those devices can share valuable data, including elevation, a specific flight path, anything that could help them recreate what went wrong in those fateful moments. As of right now, words of mourning and tribute pouring out for those 6 aviators lost, all of them veteran aviators, many of them military pilots that now are being remembered for their service on this fateful day. We'll send it back to you.
That was NBC's Morgan Chesky reporting. The head of U.S. Customs and Border Protection has resigned after pressure from the White House. Chris Magnus was in the job for just under a year. His resignation comes as a record number of migrants are crossing the southern border. Here's NBC Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley.
That's right. So Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas accepted the resignation of Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Chris Magnus over the weekend. And this comes after some reported friction between the two. As we understand, Mayorkas wanted Magnus to step down after he refused to grant a retention bonus to the head of Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz. This is also after mounting tensions between the two, and it seemed that time for Magnus was growing short at CBP. Another piece of the puzzle here is that CBP saw record high numbers of migrants in the last year, over 2 million crossing. That's the highest the numbers have been since that data started being recorded. So a lot of pressure on the head of CBP, not that it was his fault necessarily for the number of migrants crossing, but just that that agency was definitely in the spotlight. And we understand that a lot of the rank and file men and women at the border had lost confidence in their leader of Magnus. Now, remember, Magnus comes not from DHS, not from within the ranks of CBP, but from the police departments. He was head of the police department in Tucson, Arizona, and Richmond, California. And so, by and large, people who usually have that position have already spent time on the border themselves. Now, the person who will take his spot is Troy Miller. He's the deputy right now. He'll be the acting CBP commissioner. He was also in the acting role for all of 2021. And from what my sources tell me, he was already doing a lot of the day-to-day work, meeting with White House officials, with Mayorkas, handling a lot of what would have been in the commissioner's portfolio before taking this on. So now it's up to Mayorkas and the White House to see if they want to nominate Troy Miller to be the head of CBP, and more eyes will be looking on Mayorkas to see if he will stay in that spot as he faces what could be an upcoming impeachment from Congress.
That was NBC's Julia Ainsley reporting. The UN General Assembly says Russia should pay war reparations to Ukraine. Today's resolution is largely symbolic, but it is yet another rejection of Russia's invasion among world leaders. Meanwhile, in the city of Kherson, citizens continue to rejoice. Ukrainian forces reclaimed the city last week. Today, President Zelensky joined troops there for a flag-raising ceremony.
The moment is very important. That is the biggest city what was occupied.
But the city of Mariupol remains firmly under Russian control. Many Ukrainian troops there were forced to surrender months ago. Among them were 2 women who recently made it home. They say they spent 7 months as Russian prisoners. NBC foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has their story.
In southern Ukraine, in no man's land, the first all-female prisoner exchange. 108 Ukrainian women, most of them soldiers, returning home last month.
Ukraine!
Belting out the Ukrainian national anthem. Two of the women now speaking exclusively to NBC News. 47-year-old Ludmila Kravchuk and 27-year-old Alina Mednina, both combat medics captured in Mariupol.
Це щось було незрозуміле для нас. В перші дні не розуміли, що відбувається, а потім вже якось стало зрозуміло. Дуже страшно було.
Alina, a Mariupol native, served at the Azovstal steelworks plant.
Незважаючи на те, що там відбувалось, яке страхіття там відбувалось, всі були настроєні на перемогу.
On the other side of the city, at the same time, Luda was working as an emergency responder.
Повний хаос, відбувалися міські бої, досить такі жорстокі, і працювати приходилося в надзвичайно складних умовах, тому що постійно працювали під обстрілами.
Just 3 days into the war, Luda, a single mother, called her daughters to say goodbye.
Подзвонила кожній своїй доньці, я сказала, що я її дуже люблю, і що тут може бути всяке, тому що морально я розуміла, що треба готуватися.
By mid-April, Mariupol was surrounded. Luda trapped inside the Azovmash factory, and her commander gave her a choice: surrender or fight her way out of the city.
От, я дуже не хотіла здаватися в полон. Для мене сама думка була неприйнятною. От, і ми знали, що можемо не дійти, але все-таки ми вирушили.
The group was separated the next morning, and she was captured by Russian soldiers.
The moment that you were captured, what was going through your head?
Я цього страшенно не хотіла. Тобто, коли ми йшли на той прорив, я була згодна померти, але не здаватися.
For Alina, as the final battle for Mariupol raged at Azovstal, surrender came on the orders from President Zelensky.
Я просто розуміла, що ми живі, і полон – це не такий поганий варіант, як померти. Але з іншого боку, для мене, напевно, краще було б загинути на Азовсталі, ніж побувати в полоні.
For the next 7 months, both women were shuttled from prison to prison.
То в Таганрозі з нами поводилися дуже жорстко. Там було надзвичайно жахливе харчування, просто на межі виживання. В Білгородській області нас щодня на 20 хвилин виводили на новини, але показували виключно їхній канал «Росія-24», так він, по-моєму, називався.
The Ukrainian government has confirmed that Ukrainian POWs have been tortured. The women say they're under strict orders not to go into specifics.
Морально дуже тисли. Україна нас не хоче, Україна вас обмінювати не буде, Україна...
I know you can't speak about your own treatment. Did you hear of other prisoners being sexually assaulted, of other prisoners being tortured? Was this something that, you know, the women prisoners spoke about to each other?
Ну, насправді, такі моменти були. Ми не можемо говорити дрібниці і зараз оці деталі. От, але насправді особливо дуже жорстоко поводяться з чоловіками.
By mid-October, with no explanation, both women were flown to occupied Crimea. On October 17th, this partially destroyed bridge was their gateway to freedom, to Ukrainian-held territory.
Who was your first call Who did you call?
Мамі.
Your mother, of course. What did you tell her?
Мама, я на вільній Україні. Доброго дня. Ну, було дуже багато емоцій, дуже багато. Не можна було сквозь сльози, сміх, посмішки, це все розмовляти. Просто я не знала, що їй сказати, бо...
Both are now in intensive therapy in an undisclosed location. But last week, Luda was granted leave to reunite with her eldest daughter.
Стільки разів про це мріяла, уявляла собі в голові, проживала цим моментом. Не можу вже дочекатися, коли донька приїде.
By her side, her youngest, 17-year-old military cadet Sasha, who's stayed in the country. 21-year-old Vlasta left Ukraine in April, not knowing if her mother was still alive.
She was always a fighter, but this time I wish she wouldn't be.
She's so tough.
She's always been. Yeah, she's brave. That's what I would say.
Brave.
Yeah.
I mean, your country agrees.
Yes, I think everyone can agree.
How are you feeling? You have your two daughters.
Як англійською сказати? Я на сьомому небі від щастя.
She's on seventh sky, and I don't know how you say it in English.
You're on cloud 9.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is what we would say. You're on cloud 9. Happier than you can imagine.
At least for one night, before one daughter returns to the UK, another to her training, and their mother, Luda, goes back to this grinding war. Molly Hunter, NBC News, Kyiv.
Up next, a strike at the University of California. Nearly 50,000 workers walked off the job today. We'll hear from one scholar who was just on the picket lines, just ahead. Stay close. It's one of the largest strikes the country has seen lately, especially in higher education. Nearly 50,000 workers across the University of California system are off the job tonight. Researchers, postdoctoral scholars, and teaching assistants are calling for higher pay. The UC system says its 10 campuses will remain open. That could be tough since the striking students and employees are a significant portion of the workforce. They're represented by the United Auto Workers Union. Officials say they've bargained with the university over a new contract for more than a year. The president of Union Local 2865 says many of the workers are making less than $24,000 a year, leaving them, quote, severely rent-burdened and struggling to remain in academia, unquote. The university says it is continuing to negotiate in good faith. It claims to have conducted more than 50 bargaining sessions with the unions to, quote, understand the complex and unique needs of each of the 4 bargaining units represented by UAW, unquote. Joining us now is Evan Holloway. He's a postdoctoral scholar of psychiatry at UC San Francisco. Dr. Holloway, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And before we begin, by the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I used to be on the faculty of the UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. Evan, let me start with the first day of protesting. What was the mood like? What did you hear from the other people who were with you on the picket line?
By the way, I just want to say thanks for having me again. Being on the picket line today was invigorating. We had a lot of great energy here at my site. We had about 500 workers throughout the day. There was a lot of excitement, also voicing of frustration and a lot of determination. So I'm really proud of everyone who showed up and will continue to show up until we win a fair contract.
For people who may not be real familiar with how higher ed works, explain what postdoctoral scholars like yourself do as part of the educational environment of a university.
Yeah, so postdoctoral scholar means that you have finished your doctoral degree and are helping to do a lot of management of research projects. You're working on your own research, and ultimately postdocs help make UC work. We do a lot of we're sort of the machinery that makes research move, and yeah, that's, you know, in general, we outnumber the faculty, for example, and do the majority of that work on the ground.
What are your primary issues as someone who is on the picket line now that you would like to see addressed through this negotiation?
Well, the big one is compensation. We all know inflation has been skyrocketing over the last year. And so we feel we are asking for very reasonable wages just to be able to pay rent in the Bay Area. We know recently MIT, for example, offered postdocs a $65,000 minimum salary. And while not cheap, it is more relatively cheaper to live in Boston than it is in the Bay Area. Stanford has also offered a $65,000 minimum wage for at least a year or two now. And that was before inflation. So we feel that our financial requests are very reasonable, although the university has called them exorbitant. We also have a number of other benefits, such as childcare reimbursement that they have been promising for a number of years now, and just recently put forth their first proposal, for example.
I do want to note that we got a statement from the university just before we went on the air tonight saying that the university is recommending that this negotiation proceed with the assistance of a third-party mediator, and they've proposed to the union enlisting a neutral private mediator. It remains to be seen if the UAW will consent to that. The university did list some of its offers to various levels of workers who are covered by this agreement. For postdocs, they're proposing a new salary scale, which they say would offer an average minimum increase of 7.5% above the current scale. They would update the annual range adjustments, a 6.8% pay increase for every postdoc on scale, new child care reimbursement of up to $2,500, up to 8 weeks of paid family care and bonding per year, and access to all of the regular benefit plans across UC, medical, dental, vision, life, and so on. How does that strike you? Would that be enough, or is there more that you want?
That is not enough. While they talk about the percentages in terms of an increase over our last contract, they're offering effectively a wage cut, as I mentioned, with inflation. I'm a psychologist, I'm not an economist, but I know how much money we spend on groceries, on gas, on transportation. We're also asking for transportation subsidy. And so while they talk about these increases, they're not accounting for the increasing cost of living in the Bay Area. And so I also want to note some of their other proposals are frankly dishonest. So the child care benefit that you mentioned, they have said that is for eligible postdocs, for example. But what that means is that they would be excluding all first years, which is about 40% of our bargaining unit. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And I wish we had more time to talk about this, but we'll keep an eye on this labor dispute and see how it shakes out. UC San Francisco postdoc Evan Holloway, appreciate you making time for us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We have a race to call. NBC News can finally project the winner of the governor's race in Arizona, and we're now confident in projecting that will be a Democratic pickup. We are projecting that Arizona's Secretary of State Katie Hobbs will prevail in that race over former news anchor and Republican candidate Kari Lake. Now, at the present, it looks like the margin is beyond the margin that would be enough to trigger an automatic recount. In Arizona, if the deficit is 0.5% or less between the two candidates, it triggers an automatic recount. So far, with more than 20,000 votes between them, that does not appear to be the case. But as you can see, there are still a few votes left to be brought in. Katie Hobbs, the Democratic candidate we are projecting, will be a pickup for Democrats who, in the last few years, have been trying to pick up more governor's races. You may have noticed that over the last few years, Democrats have shifted strategy from just focusing on the top of the ticket to races further down the ticket, including powerful governor's races. Right now, the leading contender to challenge Donald Trump in 2024 for the Republican bid is a governor. So these races are of increasing importance to the Democratic Party. Kari Lake, the Republican candidate, we should say, has not, to the best of my knowledge, conceded or released any statements, nor has Democrat Katie Hobbs made any statements yet. But based on the results so far, NBC News can now confidently project that a Democrat will be the next governor of Arizona, that the former Secretary of State Katie Hobbs will prevail in that race over Republican Kari Lake. If we hear more from the candidates tonight, we'll let you know right away. Some of the biggest names in tech are facing big layoffs, and not just Twitter and Meta. Amazon just announced thousands of job cuts. We'll have more on all this turnover and statements from the candidates in Arizona if we get them before we go. Amazon says it will lay off about 10,000 employees. By some reports, that could happen as soon as this week. Amazon's just the latest tech company to make major job cuts. Meta, the parent company of Instagram and Facebook, recently cut 11,000 employees. That's the largest layoff this year so far. Twitter cut about 3,700 employees after Elon Musk took over. Lyft let go of 700 people. That's about 13% of its staff. The payment processor Stripe and the cryptocurrency exchange Coinbase each cut 1,100 employees. Apple has not announced layoffs, but CEO Tim Cook says it will slow down hiring.
There's been reports that Apple has frozen hiring in certain areas. Yeah. Where do you see Apple as it tries to navigate this unpredictable economic future?
So what we're doing as a consequence of being in this period is we're being very deliberate on our hiring. That means we're continuing to hire, but not everywhere in the company are we hiring.
Joining us now is Karen Wisey, technology correspondent for The New York Times. She broke the story about the Amazon layoffs. Ms. Wisey, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Happy to join you.
So what's behind the Amazon layoffs? Is it some of the same factors that other tech companies are dealing with, or is there something more unique to Amazon that's behind its plans?
There's some things that are similar, which is that the pandemic really drove this huge influx in use in technology. So online shopping, social networks, things like that. And now we're kind of coming off that pandemic boom. And because it was such a profitable era for Amazon and for other companies, they were able to hire like crazy. And it was such a tight labor market. They were basically hoarding software engineers and anything they could do to try to make their bets on the future. But now that the economy's changing, the pandemic boom has slowed down, we're seeing that these costly efforts that have not really panned out are getting cut. So what we've reported is that somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 people may lose their jobs in corporate and tech jobs. It's in the devices and Alexa division, in its e-commerce retail division, and as well as in HR.
I wonder, with regard to the increase during the pandemic that has since kind of contracted, whether that's something that these companies might have foreseen. I mean, the CEO of Stripe, Patrick Collison, sent an email to his employees talking about being too optimistic about the internet economy's near-term growth. CEO Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, Twitter's founder Jack Dorsey have made similar assessments that they just made some big bets that didn't pan out. I almost feel like part of this is inevitable, right? During the pandemic, we really needed Amazon because we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't shop. So I don't know whether this is like corporate hubris of rich people at the top making dumb decisions, or whether this is just kind of the pandemic, the nature of it, that the economy was going to swing in either direction sooner or later.
There definitely was over-optimism, and within Amazon, a decision to kind of overbuild because they just wanted to meet the demand where it was and deal with the consequences later. They really try to serve customers in their need. That's part of their ethos, essentially. But there's no doubt that they overbuilt, overstaffed, and things like that. They've been pulling back their expansion plans around the country. And also, the economy has changed very quickly. It is just a strange moment in the economy. You still have a really strong labor market despite these layoffs, but you have, inflation's quite high, coming down a little bit, but we don't know what's going to happen. And what's notable with Amazon is these layoffs are going to be coming in the fourth quarter in the holiday season, when normally they don't try to mess with anything. They just want stability so they can really focus on delivering Christmas presents and Black Friday, splurges and things like that.
Before I got to let you go, what does this mean for people who work in tech? I remember from when I lived in San Francisco, the median employment for some of these companies was like a year. They just wanted to get there, get some experience, network, and move on to the next thing. How are people who work in Silicon Valley reacting to all of this before we go?
There's definitely a lot of anxiety around it. You hear of families where maybe both partners work at companies that are doing layoffs. At the same time, I would say broadly, these are jobs that I think will continue in the long term to be in demand. That doesn't mean it's not a challenging or stressful time in this period. I heard from one CEO of a startup here in Seattle who said maybe he can actually get some of the talent they had been fighting with big tech for now that people might kind of look to a broader range of companies.
New York Times tech correspondent Karen Wisey, appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Quick reminder of our breaking news from just a few minutes ago. NBC News can now project that the governor's mansion in Arizona will flip from Republican control to Democrat. Former Governor Doug Ducey, Republican, will be succeeded by our projection by the Democratic Secretary of State in Arizona, Katie Hobbs, prevailing over Republican candidate Kari Lake. We also projected that the Secretary of State would be a Democrat. We're still waiting on the Attorney General's race in Arizona. That remains too close to call, but that will be a Democratic pickup among the governor's mansions across the country. Hey, stick with NBCNews.com and the NBC News app for more from the candidates if we hear it. But until we meet again, I'm Joshua Johnson. Thanks for making time for us, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.